Oh, for the first time in a long time, the best times. It's a crossover episode with the Glue Guys coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, sir. It is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. You know, we thank you for making us your first listen free on all those great platforms and let you know, that today's episode is also sponsored by Bet Online. With more odds, lines, and props than ever before, Bet Online's got you covered, and we have got you covered flying solo. No time for nonsense. Doug's not here. That means we can really focus and have a good conversation as we welcome in Brian and Mike from the Glue Guys. What up, fellas? This is officially, we said before, I knew Brian once upon a time. Feels like we would have good symmetry, our podcasts, and yet we never bothered connecting, which I think is smart.
Yes. Overdue. Well overdue. I'm stealing production notes, by the way, as we speak. This StreamYards thing, this is getting elaborate. You're really...
I was absolutely blown away by that intro. I had no clue that was coming. I've never experienced... I felt like I was on SportsCenter circa 2006. Yeah. Where's Neil Everett? This is amazing.
We tried, we tried to get him in, but he just doesn't want to.
The chyron at the bottom, I don't want you to change it because it says Brian and Mike from the Glue Guys or Megan the Stallion. Please don't change it.
What I would say is
the Glue Guys.
And I'm not changing it, but I am going to just bring it down for all those YouTube watchers so that we have look at our big, beautiful faces. That's just a byproduct of having a broken key on your keyboard. So you got to do that. You want to do that spell check because those E's, they fire off pretty fast and furious. No, listen, everybody knows the Glue Guy, so I'm not really going to go too far down the laundry list of your accolades, being a great podcast that covers the Brooklyn Nets. But because we know, we finally got news outside of just reporting on speculation that Kevin Durant's officially going to come back. Mike, you and I were talking before we got started.
You were waiting for Brian.
Are you guys happy to have a superstar? You happy to have a superstar?
Yeah, so we talk. I do feel... So there's alternate realities, right, where they trade Kevin Durant for Scotty Barnes, and I get super into Scotty Barnes or Brandon Ingram or whoever that guy would have been, Jaylen Brown. I would have been, the Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and a first-round pick trade, it would have happened, and if it did, I would cry. Tears would be shed.
Of joy or of sadness? I can't really
sadness,
tell.
Pure sadness. That would be horrific. But
You wanted the Colin Johnson package from Atlanta, right?
Hey, I was bought into him as a draft prospect big time. But like I could have seen myself becoming a fan of a young team, getting excited by progress, not points and actual production, just progress. The Kenny Atkinson model, who's the next Joe Harris, who's the next Spencer Dinwiddie?
Yeah.
I'd rather have Kevin Durant, maybe not Kyrie Irving, but I'd rather have Kevin Durant and Ben Simmons. And we're in that reality, and I will stay in this reality. I will not to ruin everything everywhere all at once, the highest grossing movie from A24. But I will remain in my reality and not go to the hot dog fingers one. I can sense neither of you guys saw that movie.
Brian, do you concur? Better players are better for basketball teams.
Yeah, in general, I agree, and I'm with Mike in that I too. And I think the technical term for this is copium. I was ingesting huge quantities of copium, thinking about a Jaylen Brown Scotty Barnes was my.
I think copium's the first poo that a baby has. I think that's. Do you not?
I thought you said opium, which I figured.
You guys have never heard of copium? How is this your first day on the internet? Come on. So copium is when you're coping and you're ingesting the cope. Mike, you seriously have never heard of copium?
Meconium is the first official bowel movement from a baby.
Mike has 5 kids, so you should know that.
I don't have 5 kids.
But yeah, in general, I am incredibly we talked ourselves into a whole bunch of different scenarios that seemed somewhat okay. The Scotty Barnes one was my flavor of choice, but this is obviously a huge improvement looking back on this whole ordeal.
So we Yeah, for sure. And that's the funny thing about covering the team. Like you have the conversations. Well, if Scotty Barnes, what does that look like? How would you proceed forward? Okay, Jaylen Brown, what's the trickle down effect? Does Kyrie then get put on the market? Would you really eat Russell Westbrook's money? Right. And all those kind of conversations. But now we're here, and as we kind of said it, we stayed mostly positive when we got on to first discuss this. Okay, Kevin Durant is back, but there is also this little ring of, I think that this is the 1 year, everybody's cool. Let's all just calm down for a second and we can revisit. Like we can come back to the table on this. Do you guys agree that everything leading up to the trade deadline, what this team looks like, how they're playing together, how Ben Simmons looks like, there are still a lot of factors here that don't necessarily make this, thanks so much, we're all better now, see you in the finals?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the
And
problem.
by the way, I don't usually have two people on with me, so I will not be directing questions to one or the other. I'm just going to say it.
Mike will field it. Don't worry.
I will always jump in first.
Yeah.
But do not worry. I am the
I'm the color man.
voracious.
I just add little flavor.
Bells and whistles. Bells and whistles.
Yeah. There's no way. The funny thing is, we act like there's no one's really even acting like this. Press releases don't solve problems, and I don't. This is a new theory that I'm living by. My mother was a psychologist, and she taught me this: press releases don't solve problems. Mm-hmm. How could Kevin Durant go from wanting to fire Steve Nash and Sean Marks to being like at that lunch with Clara, Joe, Sean, and Steve and Rich, a classic group, How I Met Your Mother style friendship over there, and just say like everything, like basically everything's fine. Like, there's an element of it that we've seen before in basketball. We've talked about this, but there's a famous documentary called The Last Dance about how everyone hates each other and they still win. And it's not unprecedented to do that. NBA is sort of the sport that lends itself most to interpersonal problems leading to success on some level. Kobe actually, part of his guiding philosophy as a player, something I disagree with because I don't think this is what made Kobe great, but Kobe believed disagreement amongst a group creates sort of a better outcome, which again is just typically not true. But that's what Kobe Bryant believed. And obviously Kyrie is an acolyte of Kobe. And so like the problems are still going to exist. And, if we had a joint pod in 6 months from now, talking about trade deadline and how KD's available and all this stuff, it wouldn't surprise me, but I am surprised by, and this is sort of shifting topics a bit, but I'm surprised by the amount of commentators, I'll say like Bill Simmons specifically, or people like that, who are discounting the Nets from a talent perspective this year. Like, I understand you don't believe in the Nets because they are potentially explosive in a personality sense, but the talent is like still there. Kevin Durant, Kyrie, we talked about Ben Simmons. If Ben Simmons is what he just was pre, his sabbatical, which actually is not a guarantee, this team is awesome. This team is awesome and fun.
And I've noticed even you are a little bit low on the Ben Simmons return arc. And I'm pretty like, I don't know if I'm alone in this, and Adam, I don't know how you feel about it. I'm thinking I'm pretty bullish on Ben Simmons having a bounce back year. But people in general are like, he might never play again. I was like, I just don't, for a 25-year-old or whatever he is, that I know, I get it. There's all these circumstances, and I don't want to poke holes in any of when mental health stuff is afoot. That's treacherous. Yeah. Those are landmines I don't want to dance around. But for my part, I'm feeling like it's the kind of situation where he could come back and it would look a lot like Ben Simmons of 18 months ago.
Well, I'll tell you what, I do have thoughts on Ben Simmons and really specifically what he needs to be for this team in order for them to be successful, let alone though, I want to touch back to what you were saying, Mike, about Last Dance, Michael Jordan and the Bulls, and also about Kobe Bryant and the Lakers, because there's a very big distinction between those teams and those conversations and what the Brooklyn Nets have been. But before we do that, guys, let's tell you about our friends over at Bet Online, why don't we?
Yeah.
I got to tell you guys, betonline.net, and you know this. I'm not breaking any news here. They're the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find your favorite sports and events. Number one online source for odds, lines, and games. I know that Brian and Mike got over there and they threw a couple shekels down on the Brooklyn Nets championship odds just before the news broke that Kevin Durant was going to come back here.
Ben Simmons' MVP odds are ripe for the
Sixth man of the year. Cam Thomas, you're going to want.
I was going to say Ben Simmons because that would actually be a play. Like if he comes off the bench, is he a comeback player? I guess there is no comeback player of the year in the NBA. I keep referencing that there is, but there isn't.
But if you lobby hard enough, you can probably get there on that if you needed to. Listen though, guys, Bet Online, just quickly, if I could, continues to be the top resource for all your sports wagering information, from live game betting, scores, and podcasts. They got you covered. You head over to Bet Online today, or use that mobile device, and you can get all those action happening for you. A little bit out of order, but you get it. Bet Online, it's where the game starts. All right. Nice. Dive back in here if we want to.
I was waiting for Mike to derail it one more time just to see.
The best thing that you can do if you're doing ad reads is to have different screens. So when that comes up, I don't see that anyone is trying to communicate something to me, and I can just keep powering ahead as if it doesn't matter. So first just quickly on the Last Dance and Kobe stuff. I'm only pushing back from the standpoint of, yes, sometimes you all come back together and you win. Those teams were already winning. Like, Michael Jordan was already a winner. Phil Jackson was already a winner. The Bulls were already winners before they got to, let's do this one last time. We all want to be somewhere else. And even with Kobe Bryant, it's the same thing. He had already won championships, and then he was like, I think this is falling apart. I want out of here. And you're able to kind of, both sides have a reference point of, we've been successful. So it only takes calmer heads prevailing to maintain it. When it comes to the Brooklyn Nets, like, if anything, for both sides, ownership and for Kevin Durant and for Kyrie Irving, it's what have we seen over the life cycle of this iteration of the team? We've actually seen a lack of success, right? Like one playoff series win, getting bounced out. And when you start to then sit around the table and point your fingers, you can find ways to say, well, it's because Steve Nash may not be a coach in real life. It can be because guys weren't playing. It can be random mandates that you don't see coming. But that, I think, is the hardest part of leaning on that type of narrative that's happened before, because these guys haven't done it together prior.
Yeah, I just want to see them play basketball together, people healthy, this team establishing roles, people being fit in the way that they're supposed to be. I don't have a ton of faith in Steve Nash, but this team is almost set up so I don't want to say it. Not saying that Steve Nash is an idiot, but it's idiot proof in terms of
he's Canadian, so he's
minutes distributions, not in terms of personalities. Like you should be going in. Everyone's role is pretty defined, particularly if they get like a guy like Markieff Morris or whoever, sort of Tristan Thompson, which seems like an all-time bad decision to put Tristan Thompson onto this team. This team does not need the heat that Tristan Thompson brings.
Yeah.
But it's Kyrie, KD, Ben Simmons getting X amount of minutes. It's Joe, Seth, and Patty Mills rotating the two shooter spots throughout the rest of the game. It's Nick Claxton playing the 25 minutes as the center. Kessler Edwards maybe gets like 10 to 15 minutes. Royce O'Neal probably is a 30-minute guy. Like it's all pretty clear. The team is built. It's idiot proof. And so I want to see it. I want to see these guys play basketball so badly. Mostly, the thing I'm most excited about is Ben Simmons. Like if Ben Simmons is good, how much fun would that be? He is the perfect third star, if we can still call him that, for Kyrie, KD. He's the perfect guy. There's no other player besides Draymond Green, but Draymond's not coming here for these two dudes.
Well, and that's
Chiron. Look at that. Love it.
Listen, I'm just over here. Doing work.
Crushing it. This is amazing. I've been working with Brian for so long.
But now I got something caught my throat.
Low.
Mike, you're the producer. Again, I'm just the talent.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm okay. I made it through. But no, you were saying, Brian, about Ben Simmons, and it's a couple of things. Like he doesn't need to be. You said it too, Mike. Like the third star, whatever that standard is. He needs to replace. The first thing he needs to replace is what the Nets lost when James Harden was gone, and that's the facilitator. Like what broke down the most was just somebody to move the ball between Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. And when Harden came in and there was this willingness from Kyrie, he was like, yeah, you do your thing. I'm fine. Like that's the role and I think it's the role that he should be in. But then you looked around the rest of the roster and it was well, who's facilitating? Like, you know, who's going to set up the offense and move this ball? Patty Mills isn't that. Seth Curry isn't that. Joe Harris barely even want him to dribble. You know, like you don't have that other guy to do that. So it's like, that's the first thing that I think if Ben Simmons is healthy and comes out on paper and plays, it's funny, offensively plays a point forward role for you for big stretches. And then I think you flip the script with what you want him to do defensively. But where do you see that, Brian, as far as how many boxes does Ben need to check in order to be like, hey, you're doing the job we need you to do?
Well, I think it's also like the kind of way I think about it is it's a matter of integration. So, and I fear actually that there's a little bit of talking synergy, talking culture. I feel there's a possible dichotomy effect of what Ben Simmons does, where like we often talk about KD and Kyrie's like religion of hoop getting, where you know, for the especially this last season, it seemed that they really prioritized just like, you know, ISO, getting their own buckets, taking turns, making very difficult shots. Seems like they really value making difficult shots. I'm both optimistic and fearful that Ben Simmons can integrate, but also like it's very possible that he could get steamrolled in the religion of hoop getting, because he is not that. So like the way I always kind of think about it is like, can we run? This is when Harden was sort of like managing the offense. I always wanted there to be like an offense in 3 acts, you know, and you know, with Kyrie kind of like leading a break, and then Harden kind of running a standard offense. And then if with 7 seconds or less you need to get a bucket, there's probably nobody better on the planet than Kevin Durant. I actually feel that that's like even better now with Ben Simmons running that break, and then Kyrie kind of operating in the half court, and then still Kevin Durant being like your nuclear bomb finisher. It's for me, it's a matter of making sure that Ben Simmons can be assertive enough as a person, as a human, to actually integrate himself into that offense, because again, I'm optimistic, but there is some level of potential that he could get kind of left by the wayside and just become that full utility player, which is fine. And he'd be an amazing utility player, but you're not extracting the most value out of what Ben Simmons could bring.
Yeah, that's interesting. Cause I guess the way like when you're describing it that way, like I'm almost, I don't see him get steamrolled, but offensively, I'm like, yeah, just kind of be available, right? Like, yeah. I mean, make the passes when they're there for you. Like that's a high part of his game. And when it's on the fast break, yeah, be the beneficiary, obviously, of Kyrie Irving pushing the tempo. But you feel like and we've heard Ben Simmons say, it's not that I can't shoot, I just choose not to, which is an all-time, I think,
yeah,
great. It's a great sidestep, you know.
That's how I play too. So
yeah, exactly. I have a gluten allergy. It's not that I can't eat gluten. I just choose not to. If I did, you'd see the disaster that I become, right? So I think there is that part of it, and maybe there is that passive nature that you worry about with him. But I'll be interested to see, because I think you plug him in there, and then you talk about having Harris and having Curry healthy. Like it's just the amount of firepower you have offensively. I switch over to the defensive end, and in the biggest way, think about a Nicholas Claxton you mentioned, right? Like 25 minutes for Nicholas Claxton doing his thing. How much better and more specialized does Claxton get to become now because you have Ben Simmons? And I think that was the biggest detriment of a guy who's almost played a season's worth of games in 3 years, but is still so young in Claxton. But you kept asking him to do more and more beyond maybe what you ever really wanted to. Now you get to say, have these switches, take the more difficult defensive assignment away from Kevin Durant, let him get into a more comfortable role defensively, where he gets to use his length and his size and really pick on some of those smaller matchups too.
And can I finally say, like, I'm just celebrating the fact that we get to be at this point of the off season where we can talk about, is Nick Claxton going to start alongside, Ben Simmons and Kevin Durant, these three, nice 7-footers who aren't necessarily, well, Claxton's probably the most traditional 5 out of them, but we're running 2 other 5s who are not real 5s. It's just interesting X's and O's stuff. Finally, back in our wheelhouse.
Yeah, and thank God we have the maestro, our X's and O's maestro, and Steve Nash running the team. Thank God.
Well, because there's that part of that too. But what's your ideal 5? Like, what's your starting 5? And what are those players off the bench? Because you mentioned like Kessler Edwards in there. I think the funniest thing about this is, and we talked about it the other day, where I said to Doug, I was like, well, now you get to look back at that first round pick for Royce O'Neal a little bit more favorably, since Kevin Durant's going to be here. And we did pause there and think, is that still really, is a first round pick for Royce O'Neal still a good move regardless? But everyone's into their more compartmentalized roles. So you immediately go to Kessler Edwards and Day'Ron Sharpe and even Cam Thomas and think, right, what were we going to do with you originally? if things hadn't been so chaotic? You guys are young and you're developing. Do you look at the TJ Warren prospect and the coming back off of his injury and Royce O'Neal and say, yeah, this is back to a veteran heavy team that hopefully doesn't get bogged down with some missteps, getting guys that fall off the cliff like Blake from year to year or LaMarcus Aldridge, et cetera. Like it's veteran heavy, but without some of the risk.
Yeah, I mean, I still think so. It's interesting because Claxton, while he's inexperienced as a roll man, it's still the best thing that he does on the offensive end is rolling to the hoop.
Mm-hmm.
That's never been Kyrie's game to be playing off a big like that, to do pick and roll. Kyrie, like when Kyrie disdains having a man pick in front of him. He disdains any ounce of help.
Yeah.
He just
You're only slowing down my process. You're only slowing me down from doing what I need to do here.
He wants to operate on his own. And obviously KD doesn't need picks and he doesn't run a pick and roll offense. And while Ben Simmons could potentially be the best pick and roll big in the NBA, considering his ball handling and his passing, and he's super athletic and all that stuff, I think the starting five. So like, I wonder if they are going to start Claxton just to have like a traditional, and it would be Kyrie, Claxton, KD, Ben Simmons, and Joe Harris, right? Like, and they just kind of start traditional. To me, the optimized lineup is still going to be Claxton off the floor, Ben Simmons on it as the center, KD, Royce O'Neal, Joe Harris, or Seth Curry and Kyrie. Because like you're gonna want the Royce O'Neal defense, even though Shannon Sharp listed negative statistics about Royce O'Neal's defense in the Jazz Suns series or the Jazz Mavericks series, which is like, okay, I understand Royce O'Neal didn't do that well, but that's also because Donovan Mitchell doesn't play defense. And Rudy Gobert got absolutely blasted off the floor. So no one on the Jazz was any good in that series on the defensive end anyways. And so like, again, that actually is where Nash is going to have to choose. You can never play an end of the game situation, never, with Nick Claxton and Ben Simmons, because those are the two.
Well, Claxton's been working on the free throws though. So
yeah, I will wait for the results to improve. But they are the two worst free throw shooters in the NBA. Maybe Ben Simmons comes out firing free throws and we don't even know it. The funny thing is Nick Claxton, there's a video of him online lifting weights and he was doing bicep curls. Is there a more useless exercise for a basketball player than bicep curls? What does the bicep do for
you're talking about the ladies?
I mean, you're talking to a guy whose his whole life has been built around his biceps. Brian knows this.
That's you.
Sorry.
the absolute monsters over here.
Who's the fourth person that's in on this podcast that isn't on screen right now?
But I'm not a basketball player.
Let me see.
I'm not a basketball player.
Show me your biceps.
Nothing for you, Nick Claxton.
Show your biceps right now.
Do some rows. Get your back up. Do the shoulder raises.
Oh, the rows are bad for the back. Don't listen to that. That's propaganda.
Seriously?
From the erg machine. Oh yeah, you never want to be bent over, hunched over anything.
Must be deep in the workout regimen. Yeah. If one comment from Brian and Mike goes, seriously, no good. No,
that's it. That's all it took.
That's the relationship that we have. I trust him implicitly about back. Anything to do with the back. I trust 100%.
You touched on Donovan Mitchell, and I just want to throw this grenade into the conversation. The Nets were on Donovan's.
Change that Chiron. This is the Donovan Mitchell
short. He was on the short list. Would you do a Ben Simmons plus things for Donovan Mitchell?
Oh, I don't like Donovan Mitchell. Not as a human being or
He's
as
a bad person.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the basketball. It's all the off the court stuff.
Yeah. It's all him playing with 8-year-old children. Yeah.
We've had this philosophical conversation before where like even Kyrie Irving, like name any Trae Young. Is Trae Young as your best player on your team? Is that a championship winning team? Probably not. You run into limitations when your point guards, when smaller players are your best player. Now, obviously Donovan Mitchell wouldn't be the best player on the Brooklyn Nets in that scenario. I guess that'd be a total re-examination because everything was always predicated on if Kevin Durant's not here and you try to go and get Donovan Mitchell, like that would not be the guy you would want to move forward with for me.
I agree.
It
was in the news.
Present another option,
please.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple of factors we have to think about. Donovan Mitchell cannot be traded to the Nets if Ben Simmons is on the team, right? So because of that rookie extension rule. Okay. So
I
let's
just
just
want to see the pretense for what I said was Ben Simmons for Donovan Mitchell.
No, I know.
Sure
I'm setting up my scenario.
Oh, okay.
Brian.
Please set it up.
3-way trade.
Ah,
I'm not thinking about Ben Simmons yet. Okay. Let's say he's off the table. The Nets move him for a comparable talent. Actually, you can make it a 4-way trade.
Sure.
Why not?
If we're already doing it.
Ben Simmons goes to Indiana. Buddy Hield, Miles Turner going to Brooklyn. Donovan Mitchell going to Brooklyn. Kyrie going to LA with the Lakers. Russell Westbrook and those 2 Laker picks go to the Jazz. Plus the Nets are sending whatever picks they can, some young talent. The Pacers, because they get Ben Simmons, are sending a couple of future picks. So the Jazz get all their picks. They get the salary dump in Russell Westbrook, right? They get to clear their books. At the end of next year, they have all the salary cap space. They probably get 5 first-round picks total, 2 from the Lakers, 1 from the Nets, 2 from the Pacers. I don't know. We'll figure that out. But would you rather have Kyrie and Ben Simmons or Donovan Mitchell, Miles Turner, and Buddy Hield? This is real.
Yeah. This is Adam,
okay?
now you see what I have to, the agent of chaos that I have to work with.
Well, now, because by the way, so here's what's funny. Over the spectrum, well, first of all, it's hilarious that we're somehow on a trade conversation after we thought the whole point was that we now know we're not talking about trades. But over the life of our podcast this off season, the amount of times that Doug would say on the podcast, he's like, "Oh, nobody likes a good trade machine like Adam. Like I'll get in there, man. I'll crank the wheels. I'll turn them out." In any of that stuff, I don't see any reason. Like Ben Simmons is one of the best players you could have, like for Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Like he does everything that you want to complement those 2 guys. Like I think you want to see how that plays itself out before you go doing anything crazy in terms of moving guys around. And I don't know if if we can talk about it, I guess. Is Miles Turner, is that really, like, I feel like it's that's just the name. Yeah. It's just the guy
he's
that you
into
talk
Legos
about.
too much.
I say he for me falls into the fantasy basketball, sort of overrated machine. I mean, I love him as a fantasy basketball player.
Who was it? Sabonis, when he went out to the Kings, right? Like when that was going on too, it's like you talk about these players, and I think the one distinction for any of them is the unknown of what are they in playoff basketball, right? Like you talk about, it's like when now Kevin Love became a contributor on a championship Cleveland Cavaliers team with LeBron James, but all those years when he was statting for Minnesota, it's like, it's great, but it doesn't mean anything in terms of when it matters most and where are you in matchups. And shy of one deep down to all the way from his toes to the top of his head defensive maneuver to contest a shot, the big part was like, oh, right, when you get into championship playoff basketball, and at this point of his career, Kevin Love is like a massive liability in several areas too. And you don't think about those things when you're playing on a non-competitive basketball team. I'm not saying that that's Miles Turner, but I just think the way that you think about guys and examine them always has to be contextualized with like, what's the highest level of basketball you've played? Where's your versatility going to be? And it's why where we are right now in this moment, when you look at the Nets, when Nicholas Claxton, when you're dialing up his minutes and his workload, you're saying, okay, but what can this guy not do? There's a long list of things that starts to change how you view a player. So I would be curious if we got to the deadline and things weren't going great. One of the background, to tie this in, one of the background conversations was, is Kevin Durant not really a fan of the idea of playing with Ben Simmons? And what could the start of this season sample size tell Kevin Durant and tell Kyrie Irving and tell the Nets, where then if Simmons is playing good, but doesn't necessarily fit to what they think they want, would they move him at that point? Would they explore those options at that point once they've reset his value? That's for you, Brian.
Thanks. I'm on the trade machine over here. Sorry.
Yeah, Mike, give it to Mike. I was getting notifications.
And then let's get off. And then I want to get off of this.
Well, what's the question? Because I'm seriously on the fans mode trade machine. I just made it work. I made it happen, everyone.
No, yeah, any of that stuff is possible. I did all kinds of those things. I did the Russell Westbrook and move him to Team X and shuffle around. Yeah, 100%. If I was going to go do something like that, then I'd say go do what you need to move some pieces around and get John Collins, because I actually I like him as a player. I like him as a complimentary piece. I like that he's under contract for a little over $20 million a year on the same timeline as Kevin Durant, et cetera. Like, if you want to explore those things, but
can I ask you a question?
Yeah, right.
Brian and I do a segment, not all the time, but sometimes, the worry meter. Okay, how worried you are. Of the Nets, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, who rank your worriedness about them? How worried you are about them going into the season, both in terms of their production and also what they may do personally to the fabric of the team? Because I am more worried about Kyrie than I am Ben Simmons.
Well,
Kyrie
yeah, I
seems
mean,
like
Ben Simmons has
such a
everything in front of him, like right now, right? Like every reason to come into this season and be healthy and look good, regardless of whether it's going to be for the Nets in the long term or not, right? Like everything's in front of him. If you think that Kyrie's just playing out the string, right, and wants to be somewhere else, LA or otherwise, then I guess there's that chance. But
I'm worried about Kyrie. Like I think a part of the equation in Kevin Durant's mind, and I'm interested to hear from him. Like I don't know if he's gonna do the Aaron Rodgers and be honest. Remember when Aaron Rodgers had his remember like two NFL drafts ago when Adam Schefter tweeted that Aaron Rodgers wants to be traded. Then he had his first press conference and he like directly said, like, I hate the management. And I hate, I hate these people. These people are bad people, essentially. Like, I would actually like it if Kevin Durant said specifically, I don't trust Sean Marks. I don't think Steve Nash is a very good coach, but I'm back here because I do think that this is the best situation. I don't know if we're going to get that level of clarity. With Kyrie, it's like there's rumors from everything of that he actually wanted the extension to he may retire to he just wants to play with LeBron to he only really wants to play half the games in a year anyways. He would never agree to a contract that only rewards him if he plays X amount of games. Like,
well, my thing, but here's why I'm not worried about him. He's on a 1-year opt-in. So where is my word? Like it's 0 because okay, it wouldn't be the best scenario, but let's say it goes belly up, he's gone.
Yeah.
Okay. At least it's off the books, right? Like my worry level around is Ben Simmons fully back, no pun intended, like is the back healthy, right? Because
perfect.
That can come around again. Like you can have issues with that. So his health is probably the biggest concern. If he's healthy, then even in the scenario that in the long term, Kyrie isn't going to be a part of this team, I can immediately think about what is Kevin Durant with Ben Simmons, and now tell me player number 3, right? Where can the Nets go to add another piece with those two guys that complements them, and you can keep winning basketball over the next 3 years?
But that's the thing. If Kyrie leaves for like, let's say it's a sign and trade, right? Like he leaves next year, the sign trade, you're never going to get anything that good coming back. Right. Like the best case scenario is the D'Angelo Russell thing, which is like you get a young guy on a long-term contract that then you can use in a trade in the future. But like, that's my worry about Kyrie is that because he didn't get the extension, the Nets are in a good position. It's good that he did not get that extension. It is good for the team. It's good for Kyrie's motivation. Everything's good about that. But if let's say he retires or like he just walks away at the end of the year to another team, then the Nets are down to a situation where like you have a disgruntled-ish KD, however gruntled he will be by then, and Ben Simmons. So like I that's what worries about Kyrie. That's why I'm kind of still motivated for them to trade Kyrie Irving, because I want something back that keeps someone like a big number on their books that is valuable, that can contribute in a real way. And I just worry for long-term of the team. Kyrie's not going to be on this team. It would shock me if he's on this team for 2 more seasons.
Really?
I don't know. I know that's a long-term conversation.
No, my pet speculation is that in, going from, cataclysmic, I'm not coming back and I need you to fire, unless you fire all of management, to like, hey, now I'm back and everything's fine. I think in part of that negotiation is what's up with Kyrie getting extended on this, next contract. Like what's up with that? And I think that I think all Kyrie needs to do is show up for the first half of the season, and for any like significant portion of the season, and he's going to get that extension from us.
I agree. Sure. See, I agree with you, Brian. Like I think that a lot of that conversation was, again, Kevin Durant, and this is what we thought about too. It's, you may not love Steve Nash as the head coach, but making the statement of it's them or me is also a last statement about, I want out of here. Like, and this communicates to everybody that you don't want to be here. And it's a big ultimatum. But the fact that you get into a meeting and you come out of it with everybody being intact, and there's a little bit of the Brooklyn Nets and Joe Tsai saying, we're going to stare back into the abyss of this, right? Like we'll stare into the abyss of being an awful franchise for years. This is where we're going to go. But inside of that as well, saying what happened with Kyrie? What happened? Why did the Kyrie Irving extension not happen this offseason like I wanted if you're Kevin Durant? And if the Nets were able to communicate, it's not that we're not going to do it. We got caught up in the language of it, whatever. This push and pull, we have certain things we want to see. And he opted back in so we can keep talking. And I think you might be right, Brian. It's like if everything is going great and the Nets are a top 4 seed in the front half of this season, you could hear he gets signed to the extension in season this year, I think.
Yeah. And also, can we do a quick shout out to Pat Beverly for the timing of his? I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you saw that he went out and
what was that he said?
So he was basically saying that it's annoying.
Thanks for nothing, KD.
It's basically annoying that KD won't, like, this is before he had sort of rescinded his trade request, that it was annoying that there hadn't been a resolution on that because a bunch of teams were in a holding pattern, financially. So a lot of the guys, down your roster, they weren't able to make decisions for themselves, and some guys are going to have to go play overseas. So it was like, whenever one of these stalemates happen for a big contract guy, it just screws everybody downstream of them. And so, and
be
then,
one
like,
of the best players in the NBA, and then
but true. There's a little bit of a right to it, but to some extent, it was like, thanks for the alley-oop, Pat. Like, the timing of that was perfect.
Do you think then we'll probably get out of here on this a little bit? Oh, well, and by the way, anybody, listeners, watchers out there, to borrow from the Always Sunny podcast, Creeps, we're going to cross over the other way at some point along here too, because I think there's always good conversations, and nobody needs to know that you guys are great. We think that we're pretty special too, so it's always good to have these kind of conversations. But next time,
thanks for having us on. It's great to be on.
Wear a white t-shirt next time, Mike.
What the hell? And a black hat if you can.
Total mess. The Steve Nash piece of it, do you think that he's safe for this year as well? Because we can't, like, that was the other thing of it, is like, I guess if they, like, in the old, you can't just have a good time for 24 hours. It was like, okay, fine, everybody's back. But would Kyrie and Kevin Durant just dog it to start the year so that they would have to say, look how bad Steve Nash is, and move off of him? Like, I again also think that Steve Nash is about as safe for this year as he could possibly be. And again, inside of this conversation is, listen, man, like, we get how good you are. We're going to use you for how good you are. But you got to give me some type of ability to say, let's try a little bit of this. Let's work with a little bit of that. Steve Nash has done nothing for his coaching reputation, regardless of all the chaos around him. But we still don't know how much was what happened on the court out of his control or out of his hands, right? There's things in the playoff series getting swept by Boston where you're like, hey, guy, are you even, are you with us at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you got two superstars who seemingly were done for we're checked out on the rest of the season. So do you think that he makes it through? Let's go with upper right, Mike, this time. 500.
He is the person, I guess, in the most in pressure, right? Like the player, the locker room is seemingly set unless one of them asks out again. Kyrie can't go anywhere. Ben Simmons really can't go anywhere. So it'd be KD that could be the only one that forces his way out again. And we know how that went. Sean Marks probably isn't going anywhere because Josiah has that relationship. It's very easy to fire a coach and then, move up an assistant or try to bring someone in. I mean, we have seen Chris Finch was brought in during the NBA season from the Raptors bench to the Timberwolves bench. So it's also not unprecedented to bring in a new coach during the season. And if we want to be conspiracy theorists, if we want to put the tinfoil hats on,
always do.
I mean, people have said this, so it doesn't feel quite unique. But now that the boardroom watermarks on all Nets, marketing,
we didn't get yes.
Mark Jackson is he's going to loom quite large, depending on how much we believe KD has in terms of power within the franchise. Rich Kleiman is obsessed with Mark Jackson. He has said repeatedly that Mark Jackson should get another job as a head coach in the NBA. If KD actually gets more power because of his trade request, which may be the case, we don't really know. He may actually have more power now in the next decision like this. Mark Jackson's going to be a name that's thrown out there, and he's available to coach. I mean, he can jump out of the ABC booth and move 5 seats over, and he's ready to coach. I fear that, but I will say this. Mark Jackson was a better coach in Golden State than Steve Nash has been in Brooklyn.
Wow.
And I know people like to shit on Mark Jackson, and I I would choose.
Hey, guy, we're on a network here for crying out loud with the language.
I would choose Quinn Snyder 1,000 times out of 1,000. Right? I would grab Quinn's long locks and I would say, Quinn, come coach our team. I'm sure that would be a successful way to do it. But I actually, as much as I don't want Mark Jackson to be the coach, I also don't think Steve Nash is that good. So like it wouldn't bum me out. It would bum me out a little bit though if it was Mark Jackson.
It would bum me out tremendously if it was Mark Jackson.
This is how low I am on Steve Nash, I should say.
Well, but no, and it's, by the way, like you mentioned like Mark Jackson, which everybody, Nets fans, everyone wants him along the way. It was like, oh, that's who it should be. But like Golden State, he did a great job from a coaching standpoint. Like he was doing a really good job there. Other reasons beyond that, but inside the locker room being the main reason why he was fired from Golden State and they brought in Steve Kerr. Like the last thing that I would want to do if you're firing Steve Nash, which is fine, is bring in a guy that probably his biggest area of weakness is managing the personalities and the players and community. You know what I mean? That's what you can't bring into the locker room. Might be Steve Nash's strongest attribute. It's the problem that he may not necessarily be able to get it done on the court, right? But like you cannot bring in a guy who was specifically let go because of what he does inside of a locker room.
I mean, I don't know if we're dancing around this or not, but part of the reason that Mark Jackson got axed was because he basically facilitated a like religious like fever in his locker room. I mean, imagine that on a team with Kyrie Irving among others. It's that is going to be problematic.
That would that'd be a C. But maybe Mark Jackson has evolved.
I'm sure there's maybe some lingering. I don't want to speculate. Let's not. But
let's not speculate.
Yeah.
the last thing. How does this season play out? Or let's just
championships.
We're at the trade deadline. What is going on? Are the Brooklyn Nets just looking to maybe add a little piece, looking for a buyout guy? Tweak the roster. Everything's running smoothly for this season.
We're looking for somebody who's guarding Joel Embiid. That's what this is the meme. This is always the
Claxton's job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please.
See that guy? You see those moves when he
Yeah.
You got to be on YouTube for that. By the way, I'm available in case they need me. I'm not at the height, but I got the biceps. That's for sure. Yeah, I think that. Well, by the way, I'll even throw this one in there because everybody, you said before about, Boogie Cousins, and then like they said it was immediately like Carmelo Anthony and Dwight Howard. Those are the next two things that are going to happen for Brooklyn, and let alone that I don't think you need another. I do not like Dwight Howard, but the idea of bringing another guy that like can brick free throws and is limited, great hair guy. But does that sentiment immediately concern you if you're like, now the one thing you don't want to do again is bring in old players that have real limitations and can break down pretty quickly. Like if there's going to be a lesson learned out of this, it's here's your superstar talent. And you already have a guy like TJ Warren and a guy like Royce O'Neal. Like those are already better complementary supporting cast pieces to bring in here. I do not like the idea of saying like, now who's another old guy that we could bring in here and maybe midway through the season say, shoot, because 2 years ago they did that and it worked with Blake Griffin. The next year you did it and it didn't work on so many different levels, and that ended up really, from a Sean Marks standpoint, like that backfired on you. Like those are mistakes. You don't go out and bring in JJ and even Javon Carter and then end up being like, maybe we'll cut him and he'll just go play for the Bucks. Like there were big mistakes made from a front office standpoint in constructing a well-balanced roster behind these guys too.
Well, there's a belief that it was Kevin Durant that was really deciding who those people were. So
will we ever know? Will we ever crumble that cookie?
We'll never know. I think if we're talking about the trade deadline and what this team's going to be like, I honestly believe if everyone's healthy, the basketball will be figured out fairly easily. Now, I don't know.
You said before about like people doubting them. If this team is healthy, I don't know how you're not excited about this team.
Yeah, I think the talent will be enough on the team. They won't be perfect, but they will have an opportunity to gel and figure out their weaknesses and figure out their strengths. And they're going to have a lot more strengths than most teams. And we talk about the Ben Simmons thing. Ben Simmons will play this team if he is mentally right and everyone's healthy. Is the best team to put around Ben Simmons possible. It is shooters and Ben Simmons, right? And it's funny to think about. We talk about this Embiid stopper. It's not Ben Simmons, but Ben Simmons is going to be playing the 5 for this team a lot. And technically it'll be Ben Simmons guarding Joel Embiid. And how juicy of a matchup will that be? How electric of the rivalry between, the process versus Ben Simmons in there. That'd be so exciting. I mean, I honestly believe, again, if everyone's healthy and no one's taking sabbaticals, this team's going to be a top 4 team in the East, and we're going to feel vibes wise good enough that it's not going to feel like we have to destruct it. Kyrie Irving is the wild card, and will always be in his career. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I basically echo that. It's the paper versus reality situation that's haunted the Nets for the last 3 years. It's always looked good at this time of the year. It's tempting to want to zag and be like, no, it's but it's again, I'm getting debated. It remains tempting. As we've said, all things health and otherwise concerned, like off the table, it should be a really good team and a fun team. The RPM that we're getting, like love James Harden, don't get me wrong, but that was a slog of a team watching, those possessions a lot of the time. Just not super fun to watch. I think adding the Ben Simmons element actually just like creates an entertainment value that we've been sorely lacking for a while. But yeah, so in general, I agree with everything. Health notwithstanding, I'm pretty bullish. And by free agency, or sorry, by trade deadline, I do imagine us just rounding out those sore spots more than making huge cataclysmic changes.
Well, I tell you what, fellas, I don't like it. I love it. What an episode.
Yeah.
Came here. We had a journey. We all had hats on. It's a lot of good stuff. A lot of good takeaways here. Listen, everybody knows you can get the Glue Guys wherever you get those podcast needs fulfilled and all that good stuff. You want to plug anything? You got any handlebar mustaches? Anything you want people to know about?
Mike, what do we do?
I have a betting service. I don't know.
Smeltzcoin, the new crypto Smeltzcoin.
Like a reverse zoo where instead of the animals pet you. Is that what we're?
Yeah. No, we got a Discord and stuff. People can find us in there. It's a fun community. You guys doing Discord yet? Should hop in there.
Sounds like we should. No, yeah, listen, we like to we toe in the water. We're a toe in the water kind of podcast. We just did a Twitter live the other day. We felt pretty good about it.
That is not bad. But yeah, discord.gg/glueguys and all that stuff. And then we have the show. But yeah.
Awesome. Go find them, go enjoy them. We really appreciate it. We'll do a crossover like this again. As everybody knows on the Locked On Nets podcast, normally we close with a quote, unless I don't have Doug here. In that case, I simply say, I miss my friend, and I can't wait for him to get back here again so we can keep talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball.